Depending on how you look at this, I'm either recording very late or very early. If you didn't catch last week, I kind of talked about how I've gotten into the habit of filming after midnight, which is a horrible vice to have because I'm a mother. And if I try to film without her in my lap right now, she will scream and whine bloody murder. So I'm officially a wine mom, a cider mom today. This is the mimosa version of the Star Cut cider. It's still not sponsored, by the way. It has orange juice in it. It's a mimosa. It's socially acceptable to drink before sunrise. That's what we're doing because we're also talking about Love is Blind. By the way, hi, Kendall. New around here, welcome. Not new around here. What is up, home scale biscuit? We're talking about the last few episodes of Love is Blind season 5. So yes, that's what we're doing today. Buckle up, buttercup. We're going on a trip to hell. Time we got to episode 8, I was very much so over this season. And I'm noticing this is a reoccurring thing every season at this point. Like by the time we get to like the final stretch and the weddings and the reunion, it's just not fun anymore. If not for me doing reviews of the season, I would not have watched it. But being that we've come this far, you know, we've gone to the end of the road and we cannot let go. I didn't rush to watch it when the reunion and the wedding episodes were live. That's kind of that's a sign. I don't know, just something about Love is Blind at some point gets so exhausting. Though it's fun that first, you know, as we're picking couples, as we're seeing where things go, the falling action after that is just like tedious. Am I the only person that felt that way? I was like, oh, I don't really care. Like, who gets married, who doesn't get married? Especially because there was only two couples this season. Before I even get started, I did see floating around stuff in regards to there being whole couples that got edited out. I have not had time to look into it because, you know, there's a genocide going on. I say all that to say I haven't had time to look into it. I know nothing about it other than there was supposed to be other couples for one reason or another didn't end up on the show. The last time we were here, we were looking at the like barbecue they were doing with all the cast. Uche and Lydia were getting into it. He was insinuating she was a stalker. She was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, at the end of the last episode, Uche was going up to Milton to basically give him a whole conversation about why Lydia is not a good person, essentially. So, which leads us into episode 8. Ugh, this is so dumb. So Uche starts to talk to Milton about his history with Lydia, apologizing because he never shared with him the whole story about Lydia, especially when they were starting to make some headway, Lydia and Milton. He goes into this whole, you know, I was trying to be a nice guy. Like, I'll show you the last messages I sent to her. I was being such a nice guy, which is always a red flag. Whenever a man refers to himself as a nice guy, I pause. He's like, I was being such a nice guy, but that wasn't completely honest. She wasn't completely honest with me. And Lydia, obviously feeling some form of panic or distress about all of that, she goes up to Milton and she's like, don't listen to him. Let's go. Forget this guy, he's garbage. And Uche is like, can I have a conversation with my friend?
You're gonna let her come in between your friends?
Since when are these friends? I don't think we've ever had a conversation prior to this where they were talking to each other alone. So I'm like, what do you mean? Y'all acting like y'all were besties. And I'm like, Now, I said last time that a lot of Uche's story just doesn't make sense to me. Like the profile that he's painting of Lydia, though I think Lydia has her own issues. The story he was writing just didn't make sense. Painting Lydia to be this kind of horrible monster, but his reactions to, for one, finding out that she was in the pods weren't indicative of that. When he was telling Aaliyah about Lydia, it wasn't like he was talking about how scared he was about Lydia. He was crying about how he didn't want to hurt her. And then later we find out that he was very pressed about Milton hurting her, which he brings up in this conversation in a bit. It just doesn't sound probable based off of how he interacts with Lydia. But okay, in this scenario, she's an obsessive stalker, crazy stalker, whatever. In the chaos, he ends up talking to the cast and the women in particular about how Lydia is this awful person, and they're looking at him like he's crazy because, at least in how they've interacted with her, that's not how that is. A lot of the things that you're trying to paint off as malicious and intentional just didn't happen that way in the women's quarters. During this, Johnny is making this face like, oh my God, because Uche is saying that she knew I would be here and she planned to be here because essentially she's obsessed with me and she wants to get back together with me. And Stacy is like, why are you looking at me? Is your face okay? And it felt like very like abrupt and aggressive. I was like, huh? But yeah, he's going on and on about how manipulative Lydia is. Johnny seems to be the only person that's kind of humoring the idea because she's like, well, he did say that she knew he was gonna be on the show. Like, what he was saying was pretty convincing or something like that. There's a big argument between Uche and one of the girls in the cast that we don't really know much about. It was stupid, so I just skipped it. Milton comes back. They have the conversation more about Lydia, Uche, and Milton while Lydia talks to the girls. And Johnny is like, Uche was pretty convincing because he said that you knew he was going to be here. And he was saying that basically you were stalking him. And Lydia's like, yeah, I saw the stupid like screenshots or whatever. That man is insane. I'm thriving and I'm in love and that pisses him off. And honestly, truly, I think that's a part of it. I think that's a sizable part of it, especially because Lydia's getting married and he's not, but which he blames Lydia for. She was quote unquote sabotaging his chance at love or whatever. But I think I think he's still wrapped up in the idea that she actually isn't obsessed with you and she's in love with somebody else. Maybe the whole like head canon that you had painted about her being an obsessive stalker that's trying to ruin your relationship isn't true. And it's like, what do you do with that information? And he's just losing it. This is weird. I much prefer the apple. Also, I don't like orange juice. I forgot. Again, it just felt like the only socially acceptable time to drink alcohol is if there's orange juice in it. So Uche's going on about how Lydia isn't honest and how she planned to be here when she found out I was going to be here. She can't let me go. Like, I can show you screenshots of people that were like, she's looking at my page. And he's like, I know it's kind of funny because like I was so fixated on you not hurting her in the pods, which again is strange if she's your stalker, but now I'm telling you, don't let her hurt you. And Milton is like, yeah, I don't care about any of that. In the most like dry stem way, he goes into like, we're on completely different planes, man. Like, your perception with her is your own reality and my perceptions with her are my own reality. They're not comparable, you know?
You're in an X direction, she's in a Y direction, and I'm the Z direction. Yeah. Like, I'm not even adjacent. Yeah. Just like on a different parallel.
Which is a very long-winded way of saying, I don't give a f. And Uche is like, okay, well, don't let her come between our friendship. And again, since when are these niggas friends? Then after that, Chris and Izzy talk about Johnny and oh my God, I don't care. Like this is the most I've actually felt this way in the midst of like the chaos of a Love is Blind season. Like, I did not give a f. You know, it's the same argument from last time, which is Johnny's shady. And then in comes Stacy and then in comes Johnny. Then it escalates. And again, I don't give a shit. I will note that Johnny ends up saying again, one of these weird non sequiturs where other people are saying like, you're a shitty person, essentially. She's like, go ask anybody here if I'm a shitty person, as if like just being not a terrible person isn't sufficient. If someone's like, Kendall, you're 5'3", I don't feel the need to go like, everybody tell them that I'm actually 6 foot. I just am 6 foot, which as a side note, people never remember that tidbit about me. I don't know if I give off like 5'3" energy. If you look me up, by the way, my height is somewhere between 5'3" and 5'5", and I'm 110 pounds. Skinty. Also, I'm worth like $400 million. Don't believe everything you see on the internet. But yeah, I think it's just a very strange thing to do, to have this be your go-to. Yeah, these people are the complete arbiters of whether or not I'm a shit. But later, Chris is like, no, I love you. Obviously, if you were a shitty person, I wouldn't be with you. Blah, blah, blah. Super nice guy. So anyway, Izzy and Stacy go back to the house and they somehow get into a fight because he cares about his friend possibly being in a relationship with someone who's not great. And it's so strange to see this post the argument because she was a part of the argument. She was getting bucked too. Why were you so intense about it? Like, what, do you want him or something? And I was like, I was starting to get this vibe last time. In these last few episodes, it really solidifies. Stacy is not great. The first half, I was like, oh, shit. Well, not half, but the first part of this, I was like, oh, she's nice. Too much bronzer. kind of stuck up, gets very weird about certain things that don't make sense to me. The paper plates, the lost and found thing. I thought both of those were just funny. I don't understand that she took that very, very seriously, which did make me feel crazy because I was in the comments for a little bit after that video went up and people were like, no, Kendall, paper plates is broke behavior. Like, yeah, if he has a twin mattress in the corner of his room with navy bedding and that one ugly gray pillow, but that's not the case. This is a grown man who just doesn't want to wash dishes is how I took it. I was like, I get it. You're going to have to use some plates with me, but like, let's use them up. Let's not be wasteful. Some of y'all have never been depressed and it shows. But what I kind of noticed in those instances is it feels like she takes these little innocuous things and blows them up out of proportion, probably because she has a lot of fear and anxiety that Izzy won't show up, he won't perform, he won't fight for their relationships, yada yada yada. And it's gotten to the point that it's like, what are you talking about? Like, what evidence are you going off of? It's the most innocuous things. If anything, I think him giving a about his friend is a good sign. Like, would you not want to be with a person who knows how to be a good friend? I don't know. And also to insinuate caring about your friend means something in regards to your sexuality. And then it just turns into this barrage where it just seems like she's not happy with this, she's not happy with that. Why are you behaving as if you weren't also there arguing with Johnny? He didn't get belligerent and started brawling and stuff like that, but it got escalated, arguably by you, Stacey. So she says something that insinuates that he's not over Johnny and that you only come to me and say how much you like me and how much you love me when you have been faced with her and her shadiness. And I don't want you to like me just because, you know, she is terrible. I want you to feel that way about me. I want you to be afraid to lose me every day. And I get what she's getting at when she says that. I don't love the concept and the focus of like, you need to be petrified that I'm out the door every day. Because I just feel like it's a way to be emotionally manipulative, to feel like, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave. And I say that as a person who would definitely do that. As an avoidant bitch, I've definitely been that person. It's not good. If you're gonna be in a relationship, you shouldn't have to tell them every 3 seconds, I will leave you. I will leave you. Annoying. Just leave then, bitch. Like, if you're like, what's going on? Yeah, she's like, I don't think you're over Johnny. And he's like, this has nothing to do with me feeling anything towards Johnny because I don't. And in what I understood is like a last ditch effort trying to get Stacey's approval, which is something that I noticed at the barbecue, he would go up and be like, I really went into Johnny, and he would go back to Stacey like, you don't like her, so this is good. I did good, right? Felt like another situation of that where he just goes into, I would argue, a misogynistic place where he's like, I found it so hot when you were like cussing her out, which is sad and gross and not at all helpful to if her issue is that she feels like you only like her when you're only like super expressive about loving her when she is in contrast to someone like Johnny, or Johnny specifically. So again, she doesn't appreciate that. I wouldn't appreciate that either. And somehow this bleeds into a conversation of him not being or doing enough. Mind you, he buys her flowers every Monday, which she saw as she walked in. She's like, oh my God, flowers. And then literally 3 minutes after that, you just don't do things to show that you appreciate me. He's very like blindsided by this conversation. He's like, where did that come from? You told me you were gonna do all these things to show how much you appreciate me, and like, I've had to cook twice. You haven't cooked for me yet. The way Stacey talks, it's a very particular, like, you're not doing enough for me. You're not showing up enough for me. And there's very little like actual appreciation for anything he does, especially because, again, he does seem as though he's constantly walking on eggshells to try to get her approval. And he feels like anything I kind of do to get her approval is like ignored or looked upon poorly, and often for good reason, because there's this like desperate grab at getting her to understand how much he cares about her, and by proxy ends up down talking women sometimes to do that. And because he's so overwhelmed by that, because again, we're not seeing anything that he's dropping the ball on. Maybe there were promises he's made that he straight up isn't doing, but we haven't seen it. All we've had is her essentially constantly saying, you're not doing enough, and cutting him off. That's a big one. She does not let him speak. She does not let him speak. He could be making a point and she's like, well, I'm telling you how I feel while you talk. And it's like, that's not how the it goes. Let the motherfucker talk. But he gets frustrated. He's like, I feel like nothing I do is enough for you. So he just walks away and cries. I want to applaud him for crying as opposed to escalating and getting belligerent and getting violent verbally or otherwise, because I just wish more people would cry, especially men. I can see how frustrating that is. That's incredibly frustrating. And especially like while he's crying in the back, she's having her interview and she's like, I've done what I needed to do. Like, I've done it all. You know, I've been a perfect partner and I'm good. And then she finds him crying. Wait, what happened? Did what I do make you upset? And he's like, please just leave me alone. Nothing I do you're ever satisfied with. Nothing I give you is enough. And I'm like, yeah, she will constantly be looking for things that you aren't doing right. I'm free of puppy. She finally just decided to lay in the bed next to my filming setup. Now, as a bitch who believes that you should break up with people swiftly and concisely, I think they should break up. Personally, I just feel like this is a sign that I will always be perpetually lacking for you. And there's nothing, I'm not going to run on this hamster wheel. Like, you haven't done a 2001 giant romantic gesture where you have to run through the airport today. They end up making up when Izzy goes to her job, which I thought she was an operations manager. Why is she teaching Pilates? But he goes up there and does a romantic gesture, even when he wasn't feeling like it. They sit down and talk and he apologizes. What did he do wrong? Like, he cared about his friend and whether or not he was in a relationship that he would regret. Yep, he came to apologize. But he's very well spoken, very articulate of his emotions, and he's like, I was hurt and I felt unappreciated. Does she acknowledge that? Maybe apologize herself? Absolutely not. It goes straight into, again, where I need my needs met. And again, at this point, the only grievance that we hear that she has is that he hasn't cooked for her yet. I've had the same time constraints as you, and I was able to cook twice, so I don't understand what the problem is. She doesn't say that in this conversation, but she said it back in the house when they were fighting. And I'm just like, this shit is unsustainable. Who is sitting there doing tit for tat on who cooked dinner or not? Uber Eats, bitch. This is not a game changer. But to her, she's like, if you're not going to cook for me, what else are you not going to be able to do for me? It's like, babe, is that the deal breaker? Really? That he hasn't cooked dinner yet? From what I understand, she's blowing up him not cooking dinner yet to him not being the person that he said that he was, and therefore someone that she can't trust to be in a relationship with. At some point, there needs to be a quietness in a relationship, especially if you're trying to do it for that long. It's like every day has to be some big grand thing. Y'all can't just exist within each other's area. And then because she has all these anxieties about how she wants someone who's a fighter, I also feel like she's just picking fights to see if he'll stick around, which is never a good choice if you're with someone like me. And because he knows that that's so important to her, he's like, I'm going to show you that I'm a fighter. I'm going to keep showing up because that's so important to her, which I feel, though probably unintentional, is a very manipulative tactic. I understand that she was just articulating that she wants someone who shows up and is there through the hard times and stuff, which is very important, especially if you're trying to like spin your life together. However, showing up through the hard times aren't always just hard times that I made up. You can't just cause a ruckus just to see if they'll stick around. You have to like live life, which is why the idea of this show is stupid. You can't have enough life with a person in what, it's 2 months in total to see how they show up in hard times and see their persistence and see all that shit. So I feel like she's upset by the very function of the show and taking it out by like saying, well, you're not showing enough in this very condensed amount of time to show me how much we should spend our life together, which means you shouldn't have been on the show. But he does do a grand gesture for her because, again, she requires one to live every day, apparently. And he gives her a letter apologizing. He also gives her a plunger that says, this is a shitty situation. But this is in reference to her clogging the toilet in Mexico. This just got me thinking, I find it very strange that the woman who's so prim and proper, upset that he didn't take the time to try to impress her by not getting rid of his paper plates, also one day after meeting him ripped ass in Mexico, and she just thought it was like, oh my god, that's so funny. I didn't bring it up in the last one because like, why? But it's just like, if he ripped ass, for instance, clogged the toilet when they first met, she'd be like, ew, gross. But when she does it, it's just this quirky thing that she does. Okay, let's speed this up. Stacy meets Izzy's mom. That goes well. She's so sweet. She seems really nice. Lydia meets Milton's family. I haven't talked about Lydia and Milton much this episode since the beginning, because it wasn't really much to say. They've been fine. But she ends up meeting his family, and they're dry, stim, techie feeling. And they're certainly very like, the word I'm leaning towards is aggressive, but not in this kind of like, who are you? What are you? But there's like, so you seem to have an answer for everything. You know, that type of vibe. But I feel like it's an appropriate thing to say, like, are you ready for marriage? That's a big decision. You know, they're like, she seems fine. She seems to have an answer for everything, but we're still pretty skeptical, especially his sister. So that's the end of that episode. Finally, episode 9. This is the dress episode. So rest assured, I will be skipping most of it because I don't give a And it would seem that Izzy and Stacy are in a good way right now. He's still doing all these, again, grand gestures with the help of a production team. Again, how are we doing this every day? He takes her on a plane for them to have dinner. Does she say thank you? Now that I think about it, I don't know if she ever says thank you, but they seem to be on good terms until they aren't the next time we see them. It would seem that they off camera had gotten into a fight about money. So because we didn't see the fight, there's only so much that we can kind of piece together about the fight, especially because if we're going off of history, Stacy has a tendency to blow things out of proportion. However, or maybe this is just because I feel similarly about money. I have a lot of anxieties around the concept of like combining finances with another person, combining lives in general, but finances in particular. So I get her like kind of apprehension, but also it's Stacy who seems to have some grand anxious apprehension about everything. So what I gather from the fight is that she feels that Izzy has been hiding information vaguely around his finances, something about not having a credit card, so maybe his credit isn't great. And what we find is that the debt amounts to about $3,500. In the grand scheme of how much debt people can get, especially with student loans and stuff, the way she acted, you'd think he had 4 mortgages and a gambling problem that she didn't know about. Again, as a person who understands the anxiety around people with money, especially once you get married and they can sign off on shit for you. I've brought up finances. We've talked about finances over and over and over again. It feels like you were purposely hiding this from me because I've laid everything out. So this is the thing that you felt like you shouldn't have to tell me. And his excuse, which is pretty weak, is something along the lines of like, I wanted to sit down and talk about it and have like a formal conversation. We saw y'all have a conversation about money. We saw you in her kitchen. So what do you mean? Up until this point, it just felt like we were talking about it on a whim. No, it wasn't. She did bring up the money thing with you and you didn't say this. You didn't talk about this. So it doesn't matter how small of amount of money it is. There is some indication that you, for some reason, didn't feel the need to tell her everything. This is one of the few situations where I actually agree with Stacy and why she's kind of blowing it up into a bigger like question of your honesty and whether or not I can trust you. They end up cool by the end of this conversation, but I'm like, I could see that still being a pretty notable issue. Is that the way you handle things, that you just omit things, omit the truth, and then it slowly comes up over time, which is not a good sign. But they end up on a fine plane or whatever. And this episode ends with Milton and Lydia going to a geology museum, which was very cool to look at. I want to go there. I assume it's in Texas. So next time I'm in Texas, I would love to check that out. This would also seem as though this is in an aftermath of a fight that we haven't seen. Things are obviously a bit tense. And this ends up bleeding into a conversation about how Lydia and Milton handle things very differently. Again, I've said, like in the last time I talked about Love is Blind, that I find her to be a bit much. She's a lot. So I do understand to some degree how Milton feels. He says in a very like careful and pensive way, like, you can be quite like emotional and snappy. I feel like I don't know how to bring things up with you sometimes because I really have to watch my words with you so that you don't get upset because you tend to react very emotionally as opposed to like how I do it, which is like logically. Now, as an earth sign, I do understand a bit like what he means about the emotions being a bit overwhelming, because again, they're a bit overwhelming to me. But I just don't like this inherently misogynistic way of talking to women as if like we're children. Like, you need to do things the way I do it. And also the stereotypes around women being like super emotional. It has its own like connotation. But this bleeds into him saying that he didn't love the way that she handled the situation with Uche. He would have preferred that she just ignore him. And again, though that's how I would have handled it, but the way that he kind of counteracts the way she behaves is to say, don't do that. Don't be emotional, be logical like me, which I could see being triggering, one, as an emotional person as she is, self-admittedly, and also a concept that again is inherently misogynistic. But as I'm like watching this conversation, I was like, babe, just focus on how you feel. But he doesn't know how to do that yet, because one, he's 24 and a STEM major. But if you articulate, I don't know, I felt a particular way because of how you handled it, maybe she wouldn't take it as much like you did wrong versus like, this is how I felt. And then that gives her the space to actually give a about how you felt. And also, again, kind of takes away from that whole misogynistic undertone that comes through with that. That's why I applauded Izzy so much when he was like, I felt upset, I felt unappreciated, because that's not necessarily the most natural thing for people to do when they feel slighted by their partners. Good job. I don't know if I would have did it. As I would kind of expect from a person like Lydia, she gets very defensive. She's like, that's who I am. I am emotional. This is who I am. And you have to accept that for what it is, which in a way is kind of fair, because you knew she was emotional and kind of like very hard on her sleeve when you met. And that was partially what attracted you to her, because everyone in your family is so kind of cold and distant. So you like this very passionate and warm person. So that comes with her being passionate in a lot of ways. So take it or leave it. Episode 10. This is the wedding day. I'm not gonna like drag it out. What happened? What didn't happen? Are they gonna get blah, blah, blah. Izzy says yes. Stacey says no. Basically, the whole thing is like, I think we need more time, which again, I think is very fair. But also, I could see if this becomes a pattern of couples on this show, that we're not gonna have a show for much longer. We're again showing the inherent issues with trying to get married with a person you've known for 2 months. It's just not sufficient enough of a time. Maybe it's a good concept for seeing if you want to be in a serious relationship. But anyway, they end up on like a pretty good note-ish. Like they kiss and they seem to be on each, understand where they're coming from. But Izzy does seem to be quite frustrated in the post interview, and he's hurt and he's crying and whatever, trying to figure out what they're going to do in the future. Which is reasonable. I will say one good thing about this wedding is that someone else did her bronzer. So that's a success to me. And then Milton and Lydia get married. So that's all you need to know about that. Honestly, I didn't feel particularly strong about either couple. I find Stacey incredibly annoying. So I felt like he kind of dodged a bullet of a lifetime of feeling insufficient. Yeah, that's how I felt about it. Anyway. Episode 11. It's time for the reunion, baby. For some reason, the Lachey's are still hosting. Again, I was under the impression that last season we had gotten rid of the Lachey, but apparently not. They're still here. Yeah, they start off conversation with Lydia and Milton and Izzy and Stacey, as they were the only two couples that we saw at least go to the altar. They are quick to make fun of Lydia's thick Puerto Rican accent, which I would like to say is racist. This is a reoccurring like thing that people make fun of, like how they can't understand her, which I haven't brought up, but yeah, that happens. I don't like that. So the first point of business is Izzy and Stacey, how things have gone since the wedding. They are not together anymore. They decided to take time to themselves after the wedding. Didn't talk for about a week afterwards. Izzy kind of talks about how he didn't know whether or not they were still together. Were you my fiance? Were you my girlfriend? Were we together at all? And he kind of speaks as if he was the one that was kind of left in the dark about where things were. Whereas Stacey is very like matter of fact. We were taking time to figure things out. They end up having a conversation, and at the end of that, they just decided that they didn't want to do it anymore. And apparently after that conversation, they didn't talk for a year. Milton and Lydia are still together and happy, so no point of talking about that. Out comes Johnny and Chris, and we get an update from them. They are also not together because, as Johnny explains, this is not funny. As Johnny explains, after the barbecue, he was at a wedding out of state. The next week, she didn't see him. And then by that next week, she finds out from a friend of hers that had seen Chris, that he was in a bar or something with another girl. Good guy, Chris. Sweet Chris. I don't have a heart left to break, so I didn't feel any particular passion towards anybody this season as much as I did like an SK or a Brett. Brett didn't cheat though, as far as I'm aware. Brett still good. So I don't really feel strongly about this. I was surprised though, but all right. Chris is like, well, I was trying to find myself, and the whole point of Love is Blind is like finding who you want and what you like, and I realized I'm a people pleaser, so I couldn't break up with her, but I found someone who loved me for who I was. And 2 weeks after,
and you just said, I will always defend those I love, but if I may, would you cheat on those you love?
Apparently, yes.
That's not... If I was his current partner, that would not help me sleep at night. But Chris is like, me and Johnny have talked about it, and, I've apologized. And Johnny is like, yeah, he's apologized. Which bleeds into her kind of crying, woe is me, about how, like, I feel like the reason why he cheated, I'm paraphrasing, she doesn't say this explicitly, but I feel like the reason he cheated is because I didn't put him first, and this is like the backlash. And it's like, that's not... No, you don't deserve to get cheated on. What are you talking about? With that said, they're each separately in relationships, and they seem to be on good terms, like friendship-wise, with each other. We then find out that Izzy and Johnny ran into each other at a bar in Houston, and people keep running into each other at bars in Houston. I thought it was a big city, apparently not. They tried to make some shake for an hour and a half, like we're trying to see how things are going. But he wasn't over Stacy, so he wasn't in the real place to do things, so he was like, I don't want to waste her time. But anyway, after the wedding fell through, Stacy and Izzy ran into each other at a bar, which broke that year where they weren't talking, and they like buried the hatchet. They're still really good friends. They both are in relationship with other people. They bring out Aaliyah, who was dressed down, boots bunny sleigh purr, makeup on 10, hair is beautiful, she's glowing, and they talk about her friendship between her and Lydia and how Aaliyah felt betrayed. They do make a note clarifying that the producers had suggested that Uche and Lydia don't tell anyone that they had dated before, as that could affect the experiment. They end up getting closer to somebody, they can reveal that at any time, which does make sense about how Aaliyah reacted to certain information and how Lydia and Uche handled certain things, which makes me feel softer about Lydia. I was very off-put by how she handled that. But if she was told by producers to not say anything until she made a connection with people, I understand why she would just say, in the grand scheme of things, does it matter? I don't want Uche. And she's building a connection with him. I still think she should have told him. But I get it more about why she would be like, okay, well, maybe I just won't say anything. Maybe I could just not say anything. But also, that's your friend. You should say something. I don't know. She was in an awkward position. I understand. They do end up asking basically the entire cast, like, do you think the producers did the right thing? Which is a question that I didn't expect them to be so upfront about. Do you think the producers did the right thing in telling them to hold that back, or should they have sent them home? And the consensus is generally like, no, they should have been allowed to stay, but they should have been able to tell people that, especially if they have no plans on being with each other. I think it's only appropriate to tell each other. But with that said, Aaliyah still has the gripe of Lydia not really respecting her boundaries after she found out about their relationship. You were just bombarding me with information that I didn't want to know. And if I would have known they were together before, I would have kept my distance from her, especially considering their relationship was so recent. Lydia's like, looking at that footage, it's very apparent that I didn't do a good job of reading the room because I was holding in that information for so long. Now that I knew it was out in the open, I wanted to talk about everything, and I didn't consider how that could come off, but I had the best intentions. Aaliyah goes into like the rumor of sorts that Lydia knew Uche was going to be on the show. She's like, you said you had this instinct, like where's this instinct coming from? Me and Uche were talking months before the show. It was a 2-second conversation where Uche was like, oh, I saw the casting call for Love is Blind, and I said, oh yeah, I saw it too, and that's it. There was no confirmation or intention to go for either of us. So when she got there, she was like, my instinct, there's something inside that's telling me that I'm gonna see somebody I dated in here. It wasn't a hope, it wasn't a desire. It was like, oh God, here we go. And then Milton kind of comes in to defend Lydia. He's like, I know my wife, I know her character, but also I know how I interacted with Uche in the men's quarters. And it came off as if he was very involved in my relationship. He was prying all the time. With the other men in the quarters, if I said, hey, I want to keep that to myself, I want to keep that close to my chest, everybody else respected it. But Uche did not. He would give me so much unwarranted information about Lydia, trying to show me screenshots. And I didn't want to focus on that because, again, our relationship, me and Lydia's relationship, is completely independent from how I know Uche. Also, we're not friends. We're not peers. And he keeps acting as if we were close. Exactly. I was like, these are not friends. But Aaliyah goes into how she's in a happy relationship now with a guy that she met on an R&B cruise. What is that? I want to go. I know in Detroit, like the very old people can go on the, what was it called? Princess River Boat. Back in the early 2000s, you would see commercials for the Detroit Princess in the middle of Maury. And they would do things like, this is the cruise for the grown and sexy. And it would be like everybody's like 60 years old. Do they have some for like a younger crowd? I'll have to look into that. But she met a guy in the Detroit Riverboat. She met a guy on an R&B cruise and they're together and they're in love and that's great. With that said, her and Uche did try to date after the show and it just didn't work for a number of reasons. Notably, she found that he wasn't interested in girls like her. She wasn't his type. Literally drop dead gorgeous. But colorism and internalized racism has got y'all in a chokehold. Her skin is gorgeous. Great cheekbones. Her hair is fantastic. But beyond that, he was just kind of mean and condescending in a way that she, for some reason, didn't see coming. But that said, notably, Uche is not present at the reunion. He was asked to come, of course, but he said no, which is wild. I know this is being petty, but my theory is that he didn't want to come because Lydia's married. And he's not. And he knew that he was like the villain, maybe, and he just didn't want to deal with it. With that said, apparently he still messages Milton, who doesn't respond. One of the times he reached out to him was when he had just gotten married, saying, quote, hey man, heard you got married, want to talk about it. No, I also no congratulations, no like happy to nothing. Want to talk, say what about it? Apparently it was the consensus among really everyone, the men as well, that he sucked. And finally, to round off this hell season, we have to finish up with JP and Taylor, who comes up dressed down, bitch, dressed down. She got the gold. She got the hair up. She is glowy. She got the décolletage. Bust down, bitch. And he's still him. But they have a conversation about how everything went with JP. He blames the cameras for why he wasn't able to really like show up. It made him nervous and whatever. Taylor is like, that it's bullshit. I don't believe, because you were also like that when the cameras weren't there. So like, what? All I wanted to articulate is that I thought you looked pretty without makeup. You just came out wrong. Then immediately after that, he says that when he saw her for the first time and she had all that makeup on, it was off-putting because it seemed fake. So we just said the exact same thing all over again. Someone in my last video had brought up how there is this kind of incel talking point about women in makeup, which would fall in line with some of the like inherent misogyny that I felt last time. And I was like, is he like in an echo chamber? 'Cause that would make a lot of sense to me. Like, have you ever dated a woman? Like that's the thing. I'm sitting here like, yeah, she curled her hair and it just felt very fake to me. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, again, have you ever met a woman? I guess he just expects her to not come out showered. She gotta be greasy, boogers running out her nose, smelling like ass and depression, because that's natural. That's real. They are also both dating. He says he's been in a relationship with someone for a year. Poor thing, if that's true. But yeah, that's basically the end of the reunion. Honestly, again, I think I'm getting to the point where I think it's time to pack this shit up. I think we don't have many more seasons of this piece of shit show. I think we're getting a pattern for the type of people that are being attracted to this show is becoming less and less about like finding love and getting married. Like, I'm finding more often than not, I'm feeling this like sense of relief that a season is over, which is not a good sign. Also, this particular finale was very anticlimactic. So that's all for today, folks. If you like today's video, feel free to like today's video. Follow me on all my social media. Instagram, Twitter, both of which are KennieJD. Next week, the plan is to talk about the new After movie. Did you know there was a new After movie? I actually didn't. This is the first, even the most obscure After movies I had somehow found out about. I had no clue this movie was out. It's maybe another sign that another thing is dying and on its way out. I think this is the final movie, so it's fine. So yeah, I'm gonna watch that, see how the series wraps up. But yes, like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is just a stream of consciousness, memes, and me yelling at the government. Oh, and I have music. Listen to it. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.